Hi there. I'm Lelia Lewis, and welcome to another edition of New New Day. New day, new beginnings. Now, my question for you today is: have you ever been caught up in a bad situation? I'm sure you have. Most of us have. But the point is, when you've been so caught up that you just don't know what to do. You don't know which way to turn. I mean, your head is spinning. You constantly got questions. You're asking yourself the same questions over and over again, but you're getting no answers. Or even have you been out and about somewhere and like you even seen somebody who's looking kind of strange or acting like they're lost, looking like they're lost, and maybe even talking to themselves. Because I have. And I often wonder, what happened or what went wrong in their life to bring them to this point. This strange look. They're just like wandering around like they're lost. Who or what have they lost to bring them to such despair? And that brings me to today's lesson, and it's entitled Sick in Mind or Sick in Heart. One does affect the other. And sometimes people, their lives are just so disrupted by unimaginable disasters. And even today, we're living in a disastrous time. There's no doubt about it. We're living in disasters. We have tornadoes, it looks like all the time somewhere. There's tornadoes, there's hurricanes, there's earthquakes. We've got stuff going on that we never had on such a continuous basis. And I just wonder, oh my gosh, could you imagine? We've had little tremors and stuff, but never a real earthquake. And when they show, you see it on TV, the earthquakes, the floods, the water washing away your car, your house, stores, just everything gone. And that affects your mind. And you know, people just they're just lost. But this is how today's lesson is going to be kind of disastrous, but this is really about a person who's sick at heart, but becomes sick at mind because of the excessive heartache that he had to encounter. And it's about a man, and yes, it's a Western. It's about a man. His name was Mr. Wingate, and he took his wife and his 2-year-old son on this Mississippi riverboat cruise, just down the New Orleans. Something great to do, something they could have fun at. And they were. They were having a wonderful time. And all of a sudden, there was an explosion on the boat. And it was a boiler. A boiler in the basement of the boat had exploded, and everybody was thrown into the water. Everybody was thrown into the water, but he was rescued and brought ashore. But his wife's body was found later, but his son was never found. His 2-year-old son was never found. And this is when he really became sick at heart. A broken heart is one of the hardest things to live through or live with. And I know that for a fact. And in Psalm 147:3, it says, He, God, healeth the broken in heart, and bindeth up their wounds. And through prayer, we got to pray for strength. We have to pray for guidance. And we do get through one day at a time. But through his heartache, he still believed that his son was alive. I mean, he felt that someone had found his son and taken him for himself, for themselves. And this put him in a whole different mindset. I mean, now he's on a mission mindset, a mission to find his son. Now he's been searching and searching. He searched many places for many years. And now our story takes place 10 years after he's been searching. He never stopped, but now he's starting a whole nother mission. He's printed up bulletins. It's saying 12-year-old boy, because he would be 12 by now. He was 2 then. So now he's given a description. He has brown hair, he has dark eyes, but then he says there's a birthmark on his right inner arm. And now they're offering a $2,000 reward for his return. And back then, that was a lot of money. That was a lot of money. So, he had these bulletins. He had them all over the place in so many cities and different states, all across the country. So he had already paid, numerous investigators over the years searching for him, but they hadn't found anything. Now, these bulletins reached what they called the Gordon Detective Agency, and that was run by a Captain Gordon. But in actuality, they were bounty hunters, but they were using this title just to make them look legitimate. So when they arrived in North Fork, they saw a lot of young boys there, and they thought, well, maybe one of these might be him. So they thought of this clever idea that they're going to have a contest, and that way they could see if any of the boys could be his son. So they presented a contest to the boys of the town, and they were saying, "Oh, any boy who can catch this quarter." They stood by the water trough, and they said, "Any boy who could catch the quarter, I'm going to flip it up in the air, and any boy who can catch it can keep it." So the boys, they thought this would be fun. So they went on, they all kind of gathered around the water trough, and the man flipped the coin, and that way they could see if they had a birthmark on their arm, because the boys had to roll their sleeves up just to keep, in case their arm went in the water. So they rolled their sleeves up so you could see everybody's arm, just to catch the quarter. So once they rolled their sleeves up, they were trying to do that. And then when it was Mark's turn, he flipped the coin, the man flipped the coin even harder so that it would go up a little higher, to make sure that Mark caught the quarter. So when he flipped it for Mark, it went up higher. And of course, Mark had his sleeve rolled up, and he did have a birthmark on his arm. So they thought that must be him. So he did catch the quarter, because that was their intention. That gave them the opportunity to go over and talk to Mark. So, they were being very friendly and everything, and they asked him his name and where are your parents here? And he's like, no, I live with my pop, and he's going on and on. And they found out where he lived. Oh yeah, we just lived down the road, and he's giving them all kinds of good information. But after answering the questions and them being so friendly, he glad he won the quarter. So he's like, "Well, thank you very much for the quarter, but I got to get off to school." And he left. So the men, they were wiring. They went to the office and wired Mr. Wingate to come to North Fork because they had found his son. So Mr. Wingate comes to North Fork, and now the men are asking for their money, but he's like, "Oh, well, no, I can't pay you until I see him for myself. I need proof. I need to see him for myself." So now the three of them, since they know where McCain lives, they go to the ranch. So to see Lucas, because Mr. Wingate has to see the boy for himself. So just about that time, Mark was arriving home from school. So Lucas introduced him to them, but immediately Mr. Wingate, all he's interested in, he grabs Mark by the hand and rolls up his sleeve, pushes up his sleeve, because he wants to see the birthmark. So, you know, that's all he was interested in. And he said, "Robert, I've been looking for you for so long, son." Now, in the book of Matthew, chapter 5, verse 4, it says, "Blessed are they that mourn, for they shall be comforted." Mr. Wingate had been mourning for a long time, but he believed in God because he was always praying. And now he's being comforted, even though it's a false comfort. Because he was saying, "Oh, I've been looking for you so long, son." But Mark didn't understand. And he said, "Well, my name is Mark." But Mr. Wingate, in his mind, he was like excusing Mark like he made a mistake. And he was like, "Oh," he just said, "Oh, that's all right, son." Like Mark didn't know who he was. And then Lucas, he's like, "Well, Mr. Wingate, he's not your son. You can't just come in here and just claim him as your son. I'm sorry for your loss, but Mark belongs to me." But Mr. Wingate, his mind had taken over. And he insisted. He's saying, "I'll take you to court. We'll fight this in court. I'll prove he's mine." And at that moment, he was so flustered, and so excited, but fussing with Lucas at the same time. He grabs his chest because now he's having a seizure and he passes out. So they have to go get sent for the doctor, and the doctor comes out, and it was his heart. So he has to stay put. The doctor says he can't go anywhere. He has to have complete bed rest for a few days. So he ends up having to stay at the ranch for a few days just to get himself together so he can recuperate. Now, that just shows how ironic, how God makes stuff happen out of the clear blue. How ironic is it for Mr. Wingate's life to now be in the hands of the man he just threatened a few minutes ago to fight in court? But they say God works in mysterious ways, and he does. Who'd have thought that? Because now Mr. Wingate, he's weak and helpless, yet the man he threatened is nursing him back to health. So during that time, his recuperation time, Mr. Wingate, he told them the whole story. I mean, he told them about them meaning he told them about the story of the New Orleans trip and the riverboat accident and all the thousands of dollars he has since spent on the mission looking for his son because he really believed that somewhere along the line somebody had found his son. And so now he thinks he's found his son, and all he says is, well, it was well worth it. I finally found my son, Robert. So in his mind, he's still thinking that this is his son. But now that he's kind of recuperating, he's been there a few days, now he's getting better and they're nursing him back and feeding him and just taking care of him. So at this point, Lucas says to him, well, you know what? I can prove to you that Mark is mine. So he simply says, Lucas, he went and got his Bible and he showed him. He showed him their wedding. He showed him the names of Mark's mother. He showed him Mark's birthday. He showed him all kinds of legal papers to show that Mark was his. But Mr. Wingate's mind was so obsessed with this thing that this was his boy, he wasn't satisfied with that. All he said was, you could have written that anytime. Well, and that's how bad he just wanted to believe that he had found his son. So later, Mark and Lucas were sitting outside, and Mark said to his father, he said, I feel bad for Mr. Wingate. You think maybe he's a little sick in the head? This is Mark asking his father. And he said, no, he's not sick in the head. Excuse me. He's sick in the heart. And it's true. He said he's sick at heart, just like I would be if I ever lost you. And I spent years trying to find you. And it's true. But at the same time, they were out on the porch talking about this. Mr. Wingate was in the room praying. He was saying, thank you, Lord, for returning my son. He still wasn't giving up the notion that that was his son. Now let's turn to the book of Jeremiah. I'm just going to read a couple of verses because this is relevant now. And in verse 11, this is God speaking, and it says, I know the thoughts that I think towards you, saith the Lord, thoughts of peace, not evil, to give you an expected end. Then shall you call upon me, and you shall go and pray, and I will hearken unto you. You shall seek me and find me, when you shall search for me with all your heart. That's God telling Mr. Wingate, and he tells us the same thing. He says, I know that your thoughts are good. I know you have thoughts of peace, nothing evil, and you want a good expected end. And he says, but when you call upon me with your whole heart, which Mr. Wingate was doing, I will hearken unto you. I will hear you. I will come unto you. And I will give you peace. You shall search for me with all your heart. So that's what God's telling us. Not just Mr. Wingate. He's telling us the same thing. So let's fast forward. Okay, so he's praying, but now it's time for Mr. Wingate. He's well enough now. He's been there a week or so. So now he can go on back to the hotel. So now he's got his hotel room. Now the young boy who's bringing up his bag, he says to the young boy when he comes upstairs, he said, so what is your name? And he said, $1.10. And he said, well, where'd you get a name like that from? So the boy, he's an orphan, but he does odd jobs around North Fork, and that's how he keeps himself going. So he said there was a man, he came here and I took his bag up and he wanted a shoe shine. So I gave him the shoe shine and he gave me 10 cents for the shine, but he gave me $1 for the tip. And the people just started calling him $1.10. Now, while he's getting his room, Mr. Wingate, the other two already have their room. So they're kind of getting impatient for their money. So they're like, they didn't expect that they would have any opposition. Like now, McCain's in there, so to speak. He's become a thorn in their side. So they go again and they ask Mr. Wingate for their money. And he's like, no, you don't get it until I have my son legally. So now the two detectives, as they call themselves, they're plotting to force Lucas into a gunfight so that the one can kill him. Mr. Wingate gets the boy and they get their money and everybody's happy and ride off into the sunset. But in the meantime, the sheriff, he's done some checking on his own and he found out that they were bounty hunters and they were wanted in other states. So he went and told Lucas about it, and Lucas went to Mr. Wingate's room to tell him about the scheme and who they really are. But still in his mind, all Mr. Wingate was about was getting that boy. And he just refused to listen to what Lucas was saying. So Lucas was leaving the hotel. And as he left the hotel, the other two were outside waiting for him. And the one that was the gunfighter, he called him out. And he said, yeah, I hear you're a real bear with that rifle, McCain. And Lucas said, well, yeah, I'm a bear. And the man automatically said, then draw. And of course, Lucas, he just flipped the rifle like he does, and the man was dead before he hit the ground. So that was one down. And up to the acting guy and grabbed him up under the collar and made him confess that they knew it wasn't Wingate's son. But you know what? He didn't care. He's like, oh, well, okay. I mean, $2,000. I mean, your son was as good as any. So it was just a scheme for them. All they were interested in was the money. They didn't care whose kid it was because it didn't matter to them as long as they got their money. And that was their only interest in being there, period. So once Mr. Wingate heard the truth from making the man confess, once he heard the truth, he told McCain, he apologized for all the trouble he had caused. And actually they made a fool out of him. And he asked Mark to forgive him. So they kind of smoothed it over. But in Psalm 147, verse 3, it says, God healeth the broken in heart and bindeth up their wounds. So God was healing him in a different way, even though what happened. The most wonderful part of the story is what? The orphan boy. Because when Mr. Wingate went back to his hotel room, he asked the boy, $1.10, he asked him if he would like to come back to St. Louis with him. And the boy, I mean, he was saying, if you come back with me, a boy needs somebody, not to mention himself, because he needed the boy as much as the boy needed him. And he says, I've got a big house and I live there all alone. And you could come and stay with me. And if you want to learn another kind of business, I could teach you. I have a leather tanning business, and one day you could take it over and you would run it. And the boy, he smiled and he said, sure, I'd like that. And Mr. Wingate said, I've already got a sign over the door. It says Wingate and Son. And you could be like my son. Now let's turn right fast to 2 Corinthians verse 1, because I just want to read a couple of verses right there. And we're going to go to verse 3 and 4, because verse 3 says, Blessed be the God, the Father of mercies, the God of all comfort, who comforteth us in all of our tribulation, that we may be able to comfort them which are in any trouble by the comfort wherewith we ourselves are comforted of God. So that's simply saying God gave him comfort. He gave the boy comfort. The boy gave him comfort. So God's given everybody comfort. And so he's saying to Mr. Wingate, since I gave you comfort, you comfort the boy, and the boy comforts you. And that's what he's saying to us. That same thing applies to us in our everyday life. God is good all the time. Even in the worst times, he gets us through for something far better. So that's why I'm constantly saying, read the word, meditate, but most of all, you got to obey the word. And as long as we trust and believe, we will receive. In 2022, I was writing like crazy back then. And this is called In Difficult Times, because I was kind of stressed when I wrote this. In difficult times. Sometimes life seems to overwhelm. The reason I can't conceive, but I just need to rest in you, your blessings to receive. Help me, Lord, to understand and comprehend your ways. I need your guidance and your strength through these ever changing days. Sometimes I feel I can't hold on. It's all too much for me. Then I begin to read your word, and victory I can see. I thank you, Lord, for renewing in me the confidence I sometimes lose. I realize no matter what goes wrong, your path I will always choose. And my closing words for today are, God isn't asking you to figure it out. He's just asking you to trust that he already has. And until next week, I'm Delia Lewis. Thanks for joining me.